everybody! So this is going to be an informational video about celiac disease, and as some of you know, I was diagnosed last year with celiac disease and I've learned a lot in this past year. So I thought it would be kind of important and interesting for some of you to kind of share what is celiac disease, some of the symptoms, and just important things you should know. I figured this might be helpful for those people that are just finding out they have celiac disease because it is becoming a lot more prevalent, but also for those people who just know somebody in their life that has it and just want to become a little bit more aware. Just a quick little background on myself. Like I said, I was diagnosed a year ago, and the reason I found out I had celiac disease is because they actually suspected that my older daughter Kayla had it. She was dealing with some digestion issues, was getting a bunch of testing done, and her initial blood work came back quite high for the trigger for celiac disease, and because it's hereditary, they went ahead and tested me and I was indeed positive. I'll talk a little bit later in this video about the way they actually confirm it, but it turns out in the end that I actually have celiac disease and she doesn't. So thank goodness for her, but I found out that I do. And the funny thing is, as a child I did have a lot of the symptoms that I'll talk about that come along with celiac disease, but since I entered adulthood I rarely dealt with any, so I was quite surprised to find out. Okay, so what is celiac disease? And I want to first say, of course, I'm no expert. There's a lot of information out there. I'm just sharing with you guys the information that I've learned through my doctor and from doing my own research. So there are a lot of lengthy and wordy descriptions as to what celiac disease is, but the short version is that basically the surface of the small intestine in your body is damaged when you eat gluten. This results in the body not being able to absorb essential nutrients and can cause a bunch of other different problems potentially within the body. The statistics on how many people are affected by this are constantly changing, but I can tell you that the number of people dealing with celiac disease is definitely increasing, and from the numbers that I have found to be most recent, there is 1 in 133 people in Canada affected and 1 in 105 people currently affected in the United States. Okay, so what are the symptoms? There are a lot of symptoms that are linked to celiac disease. However, it's possible to have celiac disease and have no symptoms at all. I have a list here in front of me, so I'm just going to kind of read off some of them. Chronic diarrhea or constipation, weight loss, fatigue, cramps, bloating, and irritability are all kind of symptoms of celiac disease. It's also possible to develop kind of a burning, itching rash, and I'll put the name of that right here in case you're curious what that's called, and some people actually develop a lactose intolerance from having celiac disease. A lot of these symptoms are actually quite similar to IBS or irritable bowel syndrome, so a lot of times people are misdiagnosed with IBS. And due to the vitamin and mineral deficiency, it can lead to things like anemia and osteoporosis. So I thought I'd also add in here my personal description of celiac disease when I'm explaining to people why it's so important I don't get gluten in my diet. This is the way that the nutritionist I was sent to explained it to me, and it made sense to me, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. Basically, the lining of your small intestine, it has little things called villi, which are kind of like little fingery things, little things that stick up, and they stick out of the wall of the intestine in order to trap all the nutrients that are coming down. Okay, so you can better understand, if this was the wall of my small intestine, I should have a whole bunch of little things sticking up all along the wall like this, like little fingers kind of, which are the villi that are going to catch the nutrients from above. Well, with people with celiac disease, if gluten enters their body, it basically attacks these little fingery villi things and makes it so they no longer exist, or so that they're flat. So therefore, it's a lot harder for the body to trap all those nutrients and good vitamins and minerals that you're eating and absorb them. It can actually take several months to years of being completely gluten-free for your body to repair itself, and then if you accidentally eat some gluten, you can start right back at square one. So that's why it's so important, because I can try and get all the gluten out of my diet and be really just on top of things, reading labels, things like that, and my little villi can grow back. But if I accidentally get some cross-contamination or eat something where I wasn't quite sure of the label, I can go back to square one and have to wait those months or potentially years for my intestine to re-heal. And then of course, the longer that someone with celiac disease continues to consume gluten, the greater chance they have of all those symptoms that I listed. And then the kind of end result, or the big thing that can happen in the end, is you can end up with cancer or small intestine cancer, because your body is in a state where it's it's not okay and it's not healing and your intestine is upset because you're continuing to eat gluten. So eventually it can end up in cancer. So that's why it's really, really important to make sure that there is no trace of gluten in your diet. So really quick on screening, how do you find out you have celiac disease? Generally, you start off with a blood test and they're looking for a certain TTG marker. It needs to be within a certain level, and if it comes back too high, then that's an indicator that you quite possibly have celiac disease. And then at that point, your doctor might recommend that you go for a biopsy or an endoscopy, and it's a little sampling of your small intestine, and that's what I had done. And they put a tube down your throat to your small intestine and take samples of it, and they're able to figure it out that way. The only thing with the biopsy or endoscopy is that you need to continue to consume gluten because they need to be able to see that your intestine is reacting to it. So that's the only thing that's kind of upsetting. Once you get that blood work back that you probably have celiac disease, you're then told to continue to consume gluten, and sometimes there's a waiting list for the biopsy. So that's just something I wanted to mention, but once you get the biopsy results back, then it's a conclusive diagnosis of celiac disease. Alright, and treatment of celiac disease. There's currently no known cure for celiac disease, but it can be managed and treated with a strictly gluten-free diet for life. So gluten is obviously in products like wheat, but people with celiac disease have to know the hidden sources of gluten because it is in so many products that you just had no idea about. Things like hydrolyzed vegetable protein, malt, and spelt, certain drug products. You have to be able to read labels. It's not going to always say gluten or wheat on it. There are so many other words that can also meaning that there's gluten within it. If you're interested, I could actually do a separate video on all of the things that I have discovered this past year that contain gluten that I would have never known before. I can just give you a list of all those products. And then the last thing you have to look out for if you have celiac disease is cross-contamination, which is actually really, really important. So say for example, if I made a sandwich for my kids using a knife and a cutting board, I could not use the same knife and cutting board for making myself whatever it is I'm going to be eating. Or if I have a toaster oven, I shouldn't be using the same toaster or toaster oven with wheat products that I would be using for my products. Just things like that. It's really important when you go to a restaurant too, because there's a lot of restaurants out there that now carry gluten-free menus, but they have the little asterisks beside them that say they can't guarantee that it's truly gluten-free because it's not a gluten-free environment. So there's always the possibility of cross-contamination. And in the beginning when I was first diagnosed, I was like, it's still gluten-free, like I'm going to take the risk. It's good enough. I know there's no gluten within what they're making, but my doctor's been testing my blood work every 3 months to make sure my TTG level is coming down and that I am in fact getting all the gluten out of my diet. And it's been a year now and there is still too much gluten in my diet, and I'm aware of every single thing I eat. I have checked the labels on every single thing I eat. I have my own cutting boards and knives and everything, so the only thing I can think of is that somehow I'm getting some sort of cross-contamination, so I'm having to go to the effort of making sure, like even peanut butter, you shouldn't be sharing the same jar with like wheat products that you would with your own products. So I'm just having to be really, really stringent. So I think that's about it. I wanted to keep this video rather short, just kind of get out the important information, the stuff that I have learned over the past year that I thought would be helpful to those who have just found out they have celiac disease, or again know somebody that has it and just want to know a little bit more about why they're so concerned about gluten in their diet and reading labels and things like that. I just thought it would be informative. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!